do a serious one.
Yeah.
So joining you live from the World Championship 2023 in Barcelona, the Living Legend podcast.
One of those weeks, and we can roll straight into it. If you are recording now, we can just roll straight into this. Welcome back to the Living Legends podcast. I'm your host for today.
Hello.
My name's Az from Go Again Gaming, and joined as always by two lovely folks. We'll start alphabetically, as you hosts always say, alphabetically, and I believe that's Bill this time. How's it going, mate?
That would be me. Yeah, I'm doing all right. It's a bit of a slow news week. There are obviously some shakeups that we can talk about for sure, but I think largely we're just going to be going over those, and we'll just kind of see where it takes us.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got Kel as well. How's it going?
Hello. I'm doing quite well. I don't know if I'm going to keep the little preamble in, but I have a pretty fun Arsenal stuff to talk about. I basically spent the entire week either prepping for or attending Anime Expo, and I will talk about that at the thing at the end. But
Nice.
in regards to Flesh and Blood, I got much to talk about. About this week, man. So yeah, should be an interesting episode.
No, exactly. Yeah, so we're just going to be riffing. There's going to be times when we've discussed this before, that because of the release schedule and things, and maybe that's a question we can ask to the audience and just maybe have that discussion again at some point. Is what we feel the release schedule is still like? Do we like it? Should it be somewhere along the lines of what we had before? Should it be draft sets only? Should it be the other stuff? We can maybe touch on that as well. But yeah, there's some sort of lulls in this game every now and again, and that's just what happens, right? So
yeah, Flesh and Blood is reaching an interesting point for me and a lot of people. I think I had a really interesting conversation with some folks in the Rogues Gallery community Discord on my way to AX. Like I was just chatting with them like while I was in the airport, and like partially on the plane too. And I don't know, I think Flesh and Blood's at a interesting point, and we could talk about that, I guess, a little bit later. I can maybe even pull up some of the things, because like it's one of those games that like it tried a tiny little bit to appeal to a more casual audience, but if we're gonna be honest here, it really is a game that has solidified itself as like the competitive card game, and not just among Flesh and Blood players. That's how everyone else sees the game. Even people who have barely played Flesh and Blood, people who just know about the game, they know it as the competitive card game, and I think it's actually turned away a lot of people. So we can talk about that, and it could be a little topic we could talk about. I can pull up the points that we
we could. I mean, everybody's probably heard about the banned and restricted stuff already. We're gonna touch on that as well. So I mean, we could go on that thread for a little bit if we wanted to at the moment. But before we go into that, it sort of all melds in together with the week in Flesh and Blood that I've had, because casual play is something that I'm sort of quite an advocate for. And I started something this year called the League That Means Nothing, which is basically a way to play Flesh and Blood in a sort of league / casually competitive environment where you can get points and you can get to a top 8 and all this, but ultimately you get nothing from doing that. And it's something that everybody in this podcast is involved in this time round, which is nice. It's gonna be a fun time. We could maybe a little touch on that a little bit. I'm going to be playing Riptide in this tournament. So my round 1 is going to be against Betsy. So that should be an interesting game. never played against Betsy, or never seen a Betsy deck be played before, and it's against my good mate Pascal as well. The Swiss
nice.
Superman, I call him. There's a load of cool people in this league, but yeah, I mean, have you sorted your game out yet, Bill? Because you're playing against Ian, aren't you?
Yes, so I'm going to be playing against Ian, Right Time Gaming. Thankfully were able to figure out a time that works for both of us, and it's in my own time zone tomorrow, right after I'm done work, basically. And
nice.
I think that it's quite funny. I'm the only person playing Zen.
Yes.
But I did confirm that before the lists were finalized and before the banned and restricted. And when the banned and restricted came out, Az actually messaged me. He's like, "Hey, do you like still want to play Zen? Because obviously Bonds got banned and whatever." And I was like, "I don't play a single copy of Bonds. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to make a bunch of cats." And it like the deck, I still think that he is extremely good, even without building into Bonds and whatever. But I would prefer to do the fun stuff instead of the good stuff. So yeah, I'm quite excited. He hasn't told me what he's playing, and I don't think I've noticed it if he's mentioned it in the Discord. So it's a surprise to me right now. But
do you want to know?
Fun. You know what? I'm okay. I don't want to have any sort of, because I'm putting the deck together like tonight after we're done this. I don't want there to be any sort of like subconscious like, oh, I'm going to put this, like I don't intend to like super like, I guess not net deck against opponents, but like
meta game,
build my deck.
You know, the meta game. Yeah,
I don't really want to do that. I actually like most of the time when given the option to sideboard, I simply do not. So like
nice.
My Blitz Prism list has exactly 40 cards and 4 equipments and a weapon. That's it. I don't have alternate cards. I don't live that life. So
I love how you're playing, obviously, the hero that's just had bans because he's so good, but you're playing him in a chaotic way.
Yeah.
But there's a nice little there's a nice little statement on the banned and restricted list about Tiger Zen in comparison to what the people are playing or what was playing with Bond Zen. So it's interesting how LSS have also sort of identified that the way they wanted to go was more what you're doing with Tigers and how another player at UK Games Expo built his deck. But we can go into that when we get to the B&R because I think it's an interesting polarity between the two. So yeah, you're playing Zen, which is nice. You're the only Zen in the tournament as well, which is cool. And that's what I like about this is because these leagues and stuff that are being done by myself, a lot of people know what they're getting into. They know that it's not all about the meta. It's not all about what you should play. Nu's quite popular. Azalea's quite popular, but I think that's just because the Azalea circle that I'm in, people get involved and they play a lot of Azalea, so maybe that's what that is. But Kel, you're playing Nu, aren't you, in this little tournament?
I mean, I was gonna play Nu no matter what. Like even if she was bad.
Yeah. Exactly.
I'm playing her just because I really like her. I like her as a character.
Yeah.
My deck is, I mean, like I'm running stuff like Plague Hive, right? So I don't necessarily have what you'd call like a meta list, though it's probably pretty darn close. I think there's a lot of like pretty obvious inclusions that you'd run in a new deck. Yeah, I don't know. The funny thing is like this is the first deck that I've built in over a year. First like new Flesh and Blood deck. And I also haven't played it yet, so my very first round is gonna be the first time ever playing like Nu. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. We'll see. I think my first round opponent is Teklo Vossen, or is it Dash? It's one of the mechanologists.
It is Teklo.
Teklo, okay.
Teklo, yeah.
So
yeah.
So
that'll be an interesting one.
I probably won't really sideboard much out. The only sideboard tech that I have is I'm running Oasis Respite, so I should probably take out Oasis Respite. Doesn't seem really efficient against Teklo Vossen, but probably run everything else. Yeah.
Why not? That's what I mean though. Like those sorts of matchups, like Nu versus Teklo, and Riptide versus who am I playing against? Sorry, I mentioned it earlier. Completely forgot already who I'm playing against. Betsy.
Betsy.
You don't see. Can't remember because it's like, is it even a hero? Is Betsy a hero? That's why I was blanking on it. You just don't see those games. You just don't see those games televised, albeit commentated on as well. So I've got the Irish lads who Bill. They're going to be the main casters this time round. I think they did a great job last time, and the sort of dynamic between Ian and Connor, because they record it in the same room, similar to how you and Jay did when you did it. It just flows a lot better because you're sat right next to them. There's no delay or anything, so you're both watching the same screen. So it's a lot better, and they did a great job. So they're coming back for it. yeah, that was just sort of going into the casual play thing. You know, Flesh and Blood has tried to do casual things, and in the 2.0, which seems like ages ago, they mentioned PvE, and you know, casual is not the only way. You know, competitive is not the only way to play, but
they need
as you
to
said, Kel,
commit. Like they half-ass it. Like they even know that they half-ass it, because every time James White gets asked the questions, he's always like, his answer is always, our focus is on the competitive scene. Like that's basically his focus every single time, or his answer every time people ask about like PvE and all this other stuff. He's like, our focus is currently on this, and it's like, yeah, it is, and I think they do it well, but I think, you know, that's what it is. So it's tough to get like.
And we asked him, didn't we? We did ask him, and I think the question was, you know, we already know that Fab is like a very good, is very strong with regards to its competitive play in this tournament scene. But do you try and cater to, you know, everyone, or do you try and just focus in on that? And it was quite a sort of you know, generic answer that he gave us in reference to that. But I feel like it's the same every time, isn't it? You know, it's hard to really see where they're going to go with casual play. But then saying that, a lot of people do play this game casually. They don't sort of, you know, 90% of us don't get to the top 8s or don't get to cash an event, etc.
Yeah, I mean, they play it like with the intent to win, though, right? Like it's like,
yeah.
I don't know. It's different. Like at AX, I did some gunslinging as one of the Shadowverse ambassadors, and one of the people I played against, he played just like this crazy spin your wheels, draw cards, bounce stuff like deck that I've never seen before, and I honestly don't see stuff like that in Flesh and Blood. People, I mean, maybe like super rarely, but most people are like, I'm playing the tuned deck that's gonna try to win. You don't really see like these weird jank off-ball decks where you just kind of did nothing for a while, but it was like cool. I was like, oh, and I saw some of the cards, and I'm like, dude, this is a sick card. Like, cool include. But like,
do you think this game will like get to that point though, with the fact it's eternal, and there's going to be all these cards at some point where you can win with a deck that's like really bizarre and strange, or is it just there is a best couple of decks and you play those to win sort of situation? You know,
I think it's a player mindset, because Shadowverse Evolve has only been out for 1 year, and you already have people doing that kind of stuff, where Flesh and Blood's been out for 5 years, so the card pool is already bigger. So it's not because of a lack of a card pool. I think it's because of the mindset of the players, and also the mindset of the players knowing that that's the kind of player you're going to play against, right? So like, if you're like building a deck, you know you're probably going to play against someone with some sort of optimized meta list for the most part, right? Unless you're playing against you know your buddy like George or something is like, you know, he plays crazy decks, and that's fine. But if you like show up to your random armory or whatever, you know, you're probably going to play like some variant of some topping list or something. Yeah.
That's another thing as well. Like armories, you know, over time have just become testing grounds. You know, an armory is supposed to be a casual place to play, right? But people go to their armories to grind and test their decks against, you know, that's good to a certain degree, because everybody sort of raises their level at armories. You know, that people start leveling up because matey boy's bringing a great deck, and you have to try and beat him or whatever, and you're leveling up your game. It becomes a bit of an arms race then as to who gets better, and that can be good. But then trying to get new players into that environment when everyone's already ridiculously good at the game is quite tough.
It's that mindset exactly. People are like, oh, I want to get better, I want to be good, I want to be a better player. People in other card games, they might have that mindset, but a lot of the times are like, you know, I like these characters, so I'm just gonna bring these characters, right? Like when I learned how to play Weiss Schwartz over the weekend as well, and for that community, it's like, I like Lycoris Recoil, so I'm playing my Lycoris Recoil deck, and I don't care if it's good or bad or whatever. I just like the characters. And, you know, that's not the mindset where they're like, oh, I want to get the best, and I want to be better, and every single time I play, I want to, you know, be better. It's just completely different mindsets I've found.
It is. Which I guess is why some people like it, because You know, Dark Souls, you know, those sorts of games, you know, you get good by getting killed and beaten up every time. So I guess that, you know, that sort of, what do they call it? Is it masochistic when you love pain? You love suffering or something like that.
It is masochistic when you love pain. I'm a huge fan of the Soul series. I wouldn't call it that. I wouldn't call it that.
I thought you were gonna say I'm a huge fan of pain.
No. So it's really, I don't know. It's definitely like a mindset thing, because like I'm very much like that when it comes to like the Dark Souls and like Elden Ring. I recently, if you frequent listener to the channel, you'll know that I finished the Elden Ring DLC the other week. Absolutely loved it. The final boss was some of the hardest stuff I've ever played. Probably took me about 20 minutes to 30 minutes to beat him, which is a very long time for me. I'm generally really good at these games. But I see it as like a fun personal challenge, and almost kind of like a puzzle too, because it's a single player thing. So it's like, okay, what can I do to optimize my chances of beating this challenge or something like that. And for the final boss, I actually had to respec, which is another thing that I typically don't do. And so I just like, you know, respect, kind of like thought about other things that I could do. And I see it as like a personal like challenge. But I don't think about the card games the same way, because it's like more of a relaxing, fun experience for me, rather than like, you know, this is my personal, you know, challenge time. Where it's like, you know, I'm gonna play this, you know, I have for Magic, for example, I have a commander deck that is a rogue themed deck, rogue and assassin themed deck. Is it good? No. But is it awesome? Do I think it's awesome? Yes, I love it. It's cool. It's a mono black rogues deck. I call it has powerful jank. Powerful jank.
Powerful jank is good though, and you know, you can get away with it if you're playing in a 4-player game, because you can sort of like hide in the corner of the table in like EDH, Commander, multiplayer games. I'm sure you can attest to this bit as well. There are decks and stuff, and you know, even if your deck's a solid 5, you know, you can hide on the table a little bit because you know, he's not doing anything, she's not doing anything. This game, leave them alone. You know, they're not doing anything, and then suddenly you're into the game.
Those players always win.
You don't have that in a you don't have that in a 1v1 game. There's no hiding, so I guess you do have to be optimized. Well, I don't know.
Well, no. So like in the other games that I play, okay, so Flesh and Blood is one of the 4 games that I mostly cover on Red Zone Rogue, and so like another game that I cover that's just kind of like a personal passion of mine is WeCross, and WeCross is like the perfect example of this, because like it's similar to like Weiss, and like people will play their Elrigs just because they love the character and they don't care if they're meta viable, and it is a 1v1 game. It is a very, very well constructed game. Anyone who's actually played the game can tell you this. Very, very good game. And then for me personally, I'm kind of like somewhere in between. Like I play characters that I really, really like, but if the top deck is like one that I don't like, there's no shot that I'm playing it. And so like, and then I also have my favorite character, and then like I'm gonna play her no matter what. Her name is Alfu. Like I really love Alfu. I'm gonna play her no matter what. And then I also have like 2 or 3 other decks that are like really strong, that are characters that I like, but also they're really good. Whereas like, and if I go to the tournament, so if I went to the Grand Prix coming up, I would literally just bring either Alfu or Nanashi, and they're not like the top competitive meta decks, and my chances of winning are going to be pretty small, but I would do that just because I love those characters. And I think like 80% of the people in the room would be like that. And then you have like 20% who are like, I'm bringing the, you know, the top meta deck no matter what, and they're going to try to win. But I think it's just different. I think it's just different mindsets when it comes to games, and I think that's one of the reasons why Flesh and Blood can be off-putting to some people, because it has that reputation.
Yeah. And we definitely saw that as of recently, before this banned and restricted list happened, because so many people were bringing Zen. It kind of reminded me, I wasn't really playing at this time, but it kind of reminded me of Starvo, because you know, whenever you saw a top 8 list, there was like at least 3 or 4 Starvos in the top 8. You know, Starvo's face was everywhere, and now it's just Zen's face everywhere. Yeah, I mean we can go into the B&R announcement now. There's a couple of paragraphs on here which I want to touch on as well because it begs different questions. Some of these little paragraphs, but this was put out yesterday, so we're fairly recent with stuff that's going on. They tend to sort of spoil us like that. They're like, oh yeah, have a news article, Living Legends podcast, yay! We can get on it. But in short, Classic Constructed, the main format for most competitive play, Bonds of Ancestry Yellow and Bonds of Ancestry Blue were banned outright. So similar to how Bullseye Braces was banned, this does affect all classes that can use it. So Katsu can't use blue and yellow bonds anymore, just standard. So that's one thing I want to put out straight away is, you know, we're having that splash damage again. You know, Katsu is now, I don't know, I'm not a massive Katsu player. I don't know whether they use blue bonds or yellow bonds. Have you played Katsu at all, Bill, that might use the bonds at all, or?
Not recently myself, but I do know that the thing that really pushed Katsu over the edge in terms of just bonds being like an insanely playable card was being able to have at the very least 6 copies with reds and blues, and then also some amount of yellows. I don't know if decks played all 3 yellows, but I'm pretty sure they played at least 2. Like it was, you just wanted as many copies of this card in your deck as possible because it's a tutor that's also a free 0 for whatever go again. Like the card was just so good. It allowed you to have these unbelievably pop-off turns. People have been saying for a long time as well, that, or at least that I've seen discussed locally, that bonds like maybe should have been a majestic and only come in red to begin with. Like it seemed really overtuned for a rare.
I mean, I like them. I like them printing powerful rares though. But anyway, I'm sorry.
I do like them printing powerful rares, but I think that the design of this card was, I think, intended to be a majestic. It feels very, very powerful for what it is. For like, I don't know, it just seems very good. So I think this is kind of what they intended for it to be, just in red, have it be a powerful playmaking thing, but that doesn't allow you to also have, you know, resources on an off turn when you're still setting up your graveyard and you don't quite have things to tutor with yet. Like having it just be a powerful piece is totally fine, but the fact that it did multiple things is what really pushed it over the edge, which is also why I think that the restricting, like the fact that they're trying out restricting with this is totally fine. Like I think that there is something to be said about potentially maybe revisiting something like Minnowism and Belittle and having like only certain colors of Minnowism and Belittle, because being able to play a 1-for-3 go again that tutors for a blue is really strong in a lot of decks. So if you could only play red Minnowism, I think the card is so much more reasonable. Like it is still a lot of damage. It's like a 1-for-6 kind of, but you have to kind of build your deck around it because you have to reveal. Like there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. I think this is like potentially a very good change that they've decided to implement. That's going a little bit off course for just talking about Katsu, but yeah, I think that this is like, I think the deck is going to hurt because of it.
No, that's what I mean. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of offshoots and off questions that then will just lead into all these other things, which is great for an episode like this because we've only got the one thing to speak about. But yeah, like you say, it's like a rarity shift almost. That it's as if, you know, red bonds is now a majestic because you can't play the yellows and blues. But sadly, as a result of that, you know, you're banning a ninja card. What happens? Other ninjas then can't use the blues and yellows. Katsu is an argument to be made. Maybe he likes the blues more because he's Kodachis and stuff. But yeah, that's just what happens. I'm interested to know why again they're choosing to ban. Like this to me seems more bizarre than saying, okay, bonds of Ancestry Yellow and Blue are only banned in Zen. What's the difference? You know, because you're now going down the yellow and blue of this particular card is banned. You know, but then you're still having splash damage. Although it's an interesting ban that hasn't never been done before. There hasn't been colors banned yet, has there? So far. This is the first time, I think.
Yeah, it is. Because everything else was either just straight up banned or
Just blanket ban. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and that was basically it. So
Yeah. But yeah, so Bonds of Ancestry Yellow and Bonds of Ancestry Blue were banned, and this is as a direct result of Zen, not Katsu. We were just going off on a random one there, because again, I felt for the Bullseye Bracers because of Lexi's sins, killed off Azalea and Riptide for a while. Although Azalea did win a calling with Braces of Belief. My God, that actually happened. Well done to Justin. Shout out you again. But yeah, so the first interesting statement I want to read off of this banded restricted list, what I want to get announcement and get some thoughts and stuff on, is this one. So Zen was the final hero in Part of the Misfail to reach a finished state. So he was the last one to reach that finished state. This was not born of a lack of focus or effort. Zen simply just kept breaking. That's not good, right? So Zen was the last hero to reach that finalization stage because he just kept breaking. The deck was obviously too good. Like that's an interesting statement, right? It just kept breaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that part, and a lot of this, to be honest, made me really think about like how Flesh and Blood is like actually designed compared to all of the other stuff that I play, and I'm like. It's kind of wild, actually. Flesh and Blood seems to happen more often than not these days, right? There seems to be something where like, oops, something is like this hero's busted now, and then we have to ban. And like I played 4 games. This is the only game where this kind of thing happened. So I don't know. I just find it really fascinating just how their design process. I don't know if they're just trying to make everything as powerful as it can possibly be without breaking, because they don't want to make something too weak. Because if you make something too weak, then you have a lot of problems, right? You have undesirable cards in a new set. People don't want to buy the new set. And you already have that problem that people might not want to buy the set because they're not, their chosen class isn't in the set anyway. So you do have to make it like exciting enough that maybe even other people who aren't into that set or into those heroes might actually buy into it. So like, I don't know, it's really fascinating, just kind of like watching this happen, and getting like a ban like so quickly after the release.
We're all commending LSS for being transparent. Nonetheless, they know something is up, they'll get rid of it. They're pretty good at that. But yeah, there are things to be said about, Zen just kept breaking, which is why he was the last one to be finalized. So that's a thing. And there's a couple of other statements in here as well, which also sort of allude to that. So just carrying on from that, he was breaking not in a back-to-back explosive turns type of way, but more an attack for 400 type fashion. So again, that statement also isn't good. That attack for 400 is 10 times your life total.
I don't know if that the actual 400 is like just like an exaggeration, but I have seen like people like on Twitter being like, yeah, I mean Zen can push like insane, 50, 60 plus damage turns. And he just kills you no matter what you have in your hand, no matter what equipment you have, you're just dead. You have
no agency.
Yeah. Which is like another thing I find pretty fascinating, honestly. It feels like less like an aggro deck and then more like an infinite combo kind of situation. If you play other competitive card games, you'll know like, hey, your opponent does the infinite combo, then they win, and you can't really do anything much about it, within certain parameters. So I don't know. It's just a fascinating thing. And like,
it reminded me of a tweet that I saw from Ukili Bender today, actually. So she says, lost top 8 mirror, was up 27-11 with full equipment, but he drew double Art of War plus levels of Enlightenment 3 modes to hit me for 51 and make a Zen state. Died through Zen state, equipment, defensive Art of War, and my entire hand. So all of those defensive tools that she had at the time, she just didn't win. She still lost. Not sure what world people are living in when they say Zen's fine. 145 likes.
So people say Zen's fine because Zen has like counterplay. Like we saw like new prey upon Zen. Like we saw like just like results.
Yeah,
If you just go like by results oriented thinking, we know that new can win. We have results showing that new has won in metas with Zen, right? And we saw people like Pankaj, Andreas Wenzel, Juha Sarnilampi. I'm not, but they have all won.
That's right, yeah.
They have all won events. But the problem is like I said, Zen feels more like a infinite combo kind of thing, where like if he pops off, just die.
Yeah, you're just over.
and new is like, you know, helps it make it so he can't do that. But yeah, I think I think it can lead to some really like Yuki is experiencing some really like feel bad situations where you're just like, well,
yeah,
in this game that's all about like incremental advantage and, you know, counterplaying your opponent, all that's gone and you're just dead. So
yeah, and that sort of begs another question as well, which I had written down on this little notepad I've got, which nobody can see, but it's the combo deck situation in Flesh and Blood. Is it a good thing? I know we have Kano, which is obviously more of a, you know, a deck that can win out of nowhere because you don't have the sideboard for it, but you know, Zen is another sort of comparison where you can assemble a combo and then just smack them in the face and they have no agency. There's nothing they can do.
It's
too much output.
It's so tricky with Flesh and Blood because in a lot of other games, you build into your combo. Like in Magic, you have your, you know, land resource system. Maybe your graveyard is your thing or whatever. A lot of card games you build up, but in Flesh and Blood, you don't really have that. You have access to all your things right at the start. And then if you just draw into it, then you could just do it, right? There's no like, oh, I need to get to 7 mana or whatever, right? It feels much more like, you know, like vintage or legacy Magic, where you just like, oh, you draw the hand, well, boom, I could just kill you, or just do like here, present you 50 damage, right? So like, I don't know. I guess it's like what your expectations are of Flesh and Blood as a game are going to determine whether or not you think that kind of gameplay is good for the game. So that's,
what do you reckon, Bill? Kano versus Zen. What do you think? What do you think between those two decks from what you've experienced so far?
It's kind of tough because they both suffer from the same thing where there isn't an effective way to interact with them. I think when they're able to go off, they're both really uninteractable. Because I've seen people that are like, well, I have Spell Void and I have a handful of blues, and so I like pitched all of it into Arcane Barrier, and the Kano just had everything and it wasn't enough. I think that happens less frequently right now than Zen, because even though there is so much that you can do in terms of blocking physical damage, obviously you have like a suite of like your fridge, all of your equipments that basically give you an extra, sometimes like 12 life. There's obviously cards in your hand and defense reactions that can help really effectively mitigate damage. But when Zen is able to go like 10, 15 chain links wide, you just run out of things to be able to put in front of it. And, you know, each one of those things, either, you know, it matters or it chips you down or it has a really awkward break point. So, you know, in most matchups that people are playing, it's like, okay, well, sometimes I have to consider if I want to put 2 cards in front of this thing to prevent like a relevant on hit. With the amount of buffs that Zen has access to, like that question is almost on every single attack that they're presenting for like 10 chain links. And that would, if you're anybody else is doing the math along at home, that's 20 cards. You're like, I'm going to put maybe 2 cards in front of this thing. You say that 10 times in a row. It's too much. So it really is very awkward because of the fact that I think that Zen is quite cool, but the axis of interaction that this sort of deck requires when you're able to play a bunch of things either for free or like discounted or whatever is Frostbites. Frostbites and things like Channel Lake Frigid, those are the interaction points that you really need, or just being the same thing that the Zen that you're facing down is. Like, you need to be proactive in your control instead of, like you're saying, you know, if in Magic, if you were like, okay, well, I have this 5-drop creature that if I'm able to untap with it, it allows me to combo, it gives me a bunch of resources or whatever, your opponent can go, okay, Doomblade or, you know, whatever, and get rid of it.
I just realized Magic might not be the best example because Magic's currently going through some bullshit right now with that
we don't
bird.
have to talk about Nadu.
Yeah,
it's fine. Anybody else who knows about Nadu? I mean, people are playing. I think it's called Fry in their sideboards because it's like, uncounterable.
I think the difference though is that in Magic, Nadu was like 6 out of 8 in the top 8, whereas like Zen doesn't have that exact like level of representation. So it's not quite the same, but you know.
There's also the difference of, like, you know, you can get land screwed in Magic, you can just not draw your interaction, whereas in Flesh and Blood you pretty much always have cards that you can block with. Like, there is some amount of agency that you have on every turn, regardless of whether or not you, like, again, unless, like, if you don't hit your land drops, that's not a thing that happens. If you only draw one part of your deck, that does happen sometimes in this game, but I think the type of punished that you are is it comes out of nowhere. Like you're saying, there's no build up to it. It's just if the Zen has the 4 correct cards or the 5 correct cards if they have an arsenal, sometimes it's up to 6 with Traverse the Universe. If it's later in the game, they can just go. And the only way to stop it is to be proactive, to get rid of cards from their hand, to slow them down through Frostbites or Channel Lake Frigid. And I know that when Frostbites became a really big thing, people were pissed. People were so mad because it's an annoying play style, especially when you're trying to play even remotely fair. It can be really awkward because there are certain decks like Bravo that wants to run like, okay, I want to have 2 blues in my hand to activate my hero ability and then attack with a 4-cost attack and like attack for 8 with Dominate or 10 with Dominate, and that's like a pretty fair play pattern. And but with even a single Frostbite, that means you now have another card that you need or another way to get resources or something. And it feels bad in that way. That is what it's like intended for. But this is kind of the extreme end of what that type of interaction is intended for. It's difficult.
There's like a couple sentences I want to read that kind of like highlight this from the BNR. So this is obviously from Brian Gottlieb, and he says, yes, the deck is targetable, vulnerable to disruption, and ultimately beatable. But despite all this, occasionally Zen just blows you up and leaves you feeling like there was nothing you could have done. We are sympathetic to the idea that sometimes playing against Zen just doesn't feel like you're playing a typical match of Flesh and Blood. And I think I really like, this is everything we just talked about. And he does mention Kano, which I think is funny. So he says, make no mistake, it's a good thing for there to be novel and atypical play experiences in a Flesh and Blood metagame. Not to invoke further controversy, but we view Kano as a deck that typically does a nice job of offering this type of metagame curveball. In this case, however, the curveball has become the pillar of the metagame it is built upon. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's built upon that ridiculous interaction, like you just spilled out, Bill. It's all of that, but just this is the deck you should play, and that's just not. Again, doesn't feel like you should be playing Fab. But going back into Zen quickly, you know, they were sort of testing a lot, as they do in the studio. But on one of the paragraphs here, it's mentioned that they were proud of how the team delivered on Crouching Tiger Zen. So this was clearly the focus. It was the tiger sort of focus, not the bonds lists that then the world. Another statement in here is the world did a better job of finding the bonds degeneracy list than we ever did in the studio, because we were just focusing on the flavor of Crouching Tiger Zen. And Brian goes on to say, a powerful deck that has both appropriate vulnerability disruption and very occasional capacity to play through it. The vision for Zen was embodied beautifully in Jake the Baker Warburton's deck used to win the ProQuest Plus at the UK Games Expo. Now, this is funny because I played against this deck, this Crouching Tiger deck, against Jake in round 1. And that's the game I think I've mentioned on the podcast before, where he did beat me, but there was a lot more agency in it. It wasn't the standard bonds, Art of War, garbage. You know, his deck actually played unmovable in it. I think I told you about that before. He used unmovable from Arsenal to block a big red in the ledger, and I was like, okay, yeah, Zen could potentially be defensive because he's got access to a lot of blues, and unmovable is all it costs is a blue to then block for a lot of damage, and that's exactly what they're saying here. Is, you know, vulnerability to disruption, which it did have, but the very occasional capacity to play through it, hence big D reacts. So these lists for Zen that were more sort of Crouching Tiger heavy were the ones that LSS clearly wanted to push with a flavor, and, you know, a lot of the old Kitty Katsu stuff, and people were trying to make Crouching Tiger Katsu work. They wanted that to be for Zen, but then the Bonds of Ancestry, it says here, we've been asked several times whether our team have explored that in Zen lists, and the answer is yes, but there is a clear example of how the real world just did a better job than we did. So too much focus is placed on getting Crouching Tiger Zen into an acceptable place, etc. So that begs a question as well as to, do they still not have the capacity to test every eventuality of all the cards that Ninja can access at any given time? That's hard, right? Especially with an eternal card pool.
So it's just going to get worse. Yeah, with the eternal card pool, it's just going to get worse. So this is one of the things we actually brought up when I was talking about Flesh and Blood in my Discord. Someone brought up Yu-Gi-Oh! Not in this context, but just in a different context. But it is very similar to Yu-Gi-Oh! Right? Because Yu-Gi-Oh! is their ban list is huge, and it's because they don't rotate. And they just keep releasing more and more cards, and the cards interact with old cards, and things get broken, and things get just degenerate. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just now in a place where the whole game is just kind of like degenerate. And I think it's going to be more difficult going forward. Like, every new set's going to be more and more difficult to balance just because of those reasons, right? Because more card pool, more cards interacting with old cards, and there's just a lot more players playing the game than there are devs testing the game. So yeah, I think it's just kind of a thing that's gonna happen with Flesh and Blood, just based on how the game is made.
It's a tough one to solve internally, because you need to be able to test every single card because of the eternal format, but also I think it could be good in the future, because I've mentioned this multiple times as well about, you know, there's multiple ways to take each hero when you sit down across the table from a Zen. Is it Crouching Tiger Zen? Is it not Bond Zen anymore? Is it a new Zen that does something else? You know, there could be like Dash when you sit across from Dash. Is it Tree Frog? Is it Pistols? Is it, you know, Hanabi Blaster? There is always going to be a best deck, but do we get to that stage where, you know, you can just play a variation of the hero in like 4 or 5 different ways because the card pool's so large? But then how would you test for that? Is obviously the statement that we were just touching on. It's a tough one. But yeah, so ultimately, all these factors combine to unleash a deck on the real world that falls ever so slightly outside of our acceptable power ranges. So go on to say, yes, the deck is targetable, vulnerable to disruption, and ultimately beatable, but despite all this, occasionally Zen just blows up and leaves you feeling that you can't do anything anyway. That's what you said earlier, Kel. There's no real agency, and that was encompassed in Yuki's tweet as well. You know, where she felt that she was simply ahead, a full card hand, equipment on board, and 51 damage. Here you go. You can't do anything.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just a really interesting thing with Flesh and Blood. People. I remember there was the whole thing. People attributed Flesh and Blood to like a fighting game. I think it actually does kind of feel like a fighting game to me, though, where like you could be ahead, and then someone just like combo kills you, and you miss your like combo breaker, and you just die. Like, even if you have like full health, you could just get combo killed to death in a lot of fighting games. And I'm like, well, like, this does kind of feel like a fighting game.
I've never actually. Have you ever mastered those combos where you're like keeping your opponent in the air and they can't do anything, like on a fighting game? I've never been able to do it.
I'm okay at fighting games, so there's a couple that I'm pretty good at. Shout out to anyone who plays Blaze Blue or Under Night, and I'm trying to get better at Grand Blue, but I have been okay at doing some of that kind of stuff. But the thing is like
crazy.
I think it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, and that is like your perception of what you expect Flesh and Blood to be when you start playing the game. And I think that is not what you expect Flesh and Blood to be. Like, you don't expect to be, combo killed Or technically this is like aggro because you're just attacking, but you know, it's essentially combo. You don't expect to be combo killed out of nowhere. It's just not something that's in Flesh and Blood. So
I'm more sort of Eddie Gordo, Tekken, you know, the breakdancing fella that just like throws his arms and legs everywhere. You're not trying to do any combos. You're just trying to do the eggiest moves possible that he can't block. That's my style. But yeah, so that's pretty much yellows and blues banned from CC for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
And there's any other closing thoughts on that?
I was going to ask,
there's a couple more paragraphs.
What does everyone think of it? I don't think we actually said like whether we think it's good or not. The TLDR, yeah, I think it's good. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's positive. There's to as always wrap in Magic the Gathering. There's currently a discussion right now about the One Ring in Modern, and somebody on Twitter had suggested, like, I think that it would make sense from a power level standpoint as well as a flavor standpoint if they restricted the One Ring so that you could only have one copy in your deck, because that seems like it seems like it could be better.
I think Cedric Phillips said that.
Yeah, I think it was Seti P. I do have two things to say. One, from a flavor standpoint, in the books, so many rings exist. There's like 45 of them. Just had to get that out there. Second, the thing that kind of makes Vintage its own beast, where you're able to play any card from the history of Magic the Gathering, is there are games that completely revolve around who draws their restricted card first. And it can be like, you know, if it's like kind of a control matchup, and it could be like a couple turns in a row. Obviously the games are much faster usually because the decks are much stronger, but it can be like back and forth and people can have some agency or whatever. And then one person top decks their Black Lotus and it's like, okay, cool, I win the game. You just like, it's kind of like a waiting room to see who draws their restricted card first. And the reason that I bring that up is because I actually don't feel like this restriction is similar in Flesh and Blood, because the power level of having up to 9 copies of a card is so much more than just, oh, if I draw this bonds, I win. It's like I have more ability to have access to this card, and having multiples of them, especially like among the different colors, is relevant and makes sense. Like you could theoretically have more than 3 bonds on the combat chain at one time. And and the fact that it's limiting it to a maximum of 3, as well as preventing it from being, like I was kind of saying before, more flexible in that it could be a resource piece, it could be whatever. The fact that they've just limited it to red and there's only 3 of them, I think does a really good job of restricting the power level of the deck, but not killing it. And also not making it just a bonds waiting room. Like, oh, when I draw this, I win the game. It's not quite that simple. So yeah, like actually, genuinely, I think that this was a good call. I like it a lot. And I think that it will make a difference, because even like I've still seen a lot of discussion again, like locally and on Twitter, of people saying, you know, this is a big hit to the deck, but that doesn't mean he's bad. Like it is still a good deck even without that, which kind of speaks to the power level of the deck. But you know,
like
you have to. Sorry, carry on. Do you want to go first?
Sure. We'll be quick. So yeah, I want to kind of reiterate what Bill said, but apply it to like kind of a different game, one that I'm more involved in. So in Shadowverse Evolve, they don't ban cards; they just restrict them, and they restrict them in a way that doesn't necessarily completely kill the deck. It just makes the decks less consistent to tone down their power level, to bring it on par with other decks. So the biggest thing that happened in the last like 6 months, or when the Uma Musume set come out, everyone knew the Uma Musume set was really, really good because of the Japanese meta. And instead of just banning cards out, they restricted 2 cards in the deck, down to 1 copy each. And they were cards that basically gave you crazy like card filter. And basically what it did is it lowered the consistency of the deck to the point where it was not a 1 deck format, right? And so other decks could now play. They also restricted 1 card in another deck as well, Shenlong. But what it made is it made for a really, really fun and interesting World season, because multiple decks were viable. We had a deck that no one even expected in the top 8 for Worlds. And yeah, I reiterating what Bill said. You can you can neuter the deck. You can like power down the deck without making it completely obsolete, because we still saw those other decks at Worlds. So I very much like it, and also I do really like that players can still play with Bonds as a card. It doesn't like take away all their fun, and that's one of the biggest feel bads about bans, in my opinion. Is like if you got a card and it just gets completely banned, then you're just like, well, that sucks. Like I can't play with my card anymore. Whereas at least like when you restrict, it's not quite the same because of the different color things for Flesh and Blood, but still, you still get to play with your card, which I think is cool. So.
Yeah, it's restricting. It's restricting. You know, that's a good word for it, because restricting is the same sort of thing in other games. They're restricting the amount of those cards that you can have, and they're doing that in Flesh and Blood just based on the colors instead. But what I like about it, you know, personally, is the fact that you know, harkening back to Jake's list that I had the honor of playing against at UK Games Expo, which is what they're referring to in this article, is the reliance and sort of leaning upon the actual theme and flavor of the Tigers rather than just 9 bonds list. You know, what you were trying to do in your Blade Break series and stuff, Bill, as well, as playing with more Tigers, playing with more theme and flavor and fun-esque cards that have the synergies and stuff. There's loads of cool synergies of Tigers in Part of the Mistveil. Loads of cards that do cool things with Tigers. So it'll be nice to see Zen potentially lean back onto a little bit more of that synergy, rather than just relying on, like you said, the 9 bonds and relying on on drawing those. So yeah. But yeah, so that's pretty much it, really. So we'll see these changes come into effect, and obviously that will be the next big event is Pro Tour Amsterdam. So obviously that will be effective for that. So we'll see what happens as a result of that very, very soon. And then there's a couple of other changes as well to other formats like Living Legend. Channel Lake Frigid is unrestricted, so that means Icelander can now use Channel Lake Frigid again in Living Legend format, which is interesting.
And so can Starvo and Lexi.
Everybody else, yeah. So that might see Icelander come back a little bit. So I'm not sure whether she was being represented too much in Living Legend. And then in Blitz, Crown of Seeds is still banned, and then a couple of other bans is Aether Wildfire and Aether Flare being banned as well, which I think makes sense in Blitz, because you just can't really do anything about it, can you? Aether Wildfire and Aether Flare, you just die. There's nothing you can do.
I think. Well, I mean, there's that, but also I think this is more of a preemptive thing with Rosetta being a wizard set on the horizon. I feel that they're like, oh, we need to do this now, otherwise Wizards are going to be so degenerate and unfun in Blitz that we got to ban these like ahead of time.
That makes sense. Yeah,
I think that's
actually.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just because you mentioned Rosetta as well. They also said about going back to Zen and obviously Bonds and Katsu. They say we expect that Katsu can still find ways to bring dishonor upon all of his opponents, because obviously Bonds is the line that you need for dishonor, isn't it? I believe. Is that right?
I think
Bill?
so.
Yes. Yeah, it is.
You need Bonds and then dishonor. But they're saying perhaps with some coming help from the Rosetta expansion slot. So maybe we are going to see some Katsu expansion support in the new set for Katsu specifically. But that's a good thing about the expansion slot, and Brian said it multiple times on the podcast that when he's came on, is that they can proactively then, if they have to ban something, they can then just be like, right, okay, in Rosetta we're going to add this Katsu card to help with the ban that we've just done. You know, you can proactively solve the problem that you've had by just printing something in the expansion slot, you know, as just a card. You know, that's a good thing that they can do. So the expansion block, blah, 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 can't even say anything, is proving to be a fantastic boon to the game constantly, you know, every time. So that's good. But yeah, was you going to say something else before we go on to the lightning rod, which was spoiled as well from this article? Cal, was you going to say something else?
I just hope people who wanted to play with Blaze with all of the degenerate stuff got that in before the bans.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, so that's pretty much it, really. And then at the end of this article as well, we were given because, you know, they were saying about oh, don't worry about all those wizards. You want to be doing lots of burst damage and lots of big arcane damage. Well, here we go. I guess you guess you're in for a pretty big shock come Rosetta, pun intended, because there's a lightning wizard weapon that was revealed at the bottom of this article.
I mean, the name is also almost a pun. Like, their names for a lot of their things is almost a pun. It's very close to being one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But goddamn, I love the setting of Aria, and Vault Haven, the elemental sort of aurora background and stuff like Northern Lights, loads of sort of pink and blue hues and stuff. I absolutely love Aria. It's so colourful and it's just vibrant and lovely. We're getting I was going to say we was going to get a 4D experience from Kale's room there. Going to show us the Lexi poster, were you?
It's not a poster. Excuse me.
Oh, whatever it is.
It is a limited print. There's a canvas print by Federico Musetti, a 2 out of 10. Yeah. But yeah, no, it was the Lexi, and the art for this new card is also done by Federico Musetti, which makes a lot of sense. He does like really, really beautiful Aria art, and yeah, I do like it. Yeah, still Lexi's still cool over here. Yeah.
But yeah, so this is Volzar the Lightning Rod. I'm not sure if you can. Is this floating up on the screen for people to see?
I can pull it up.
Maybe not. Maybe it is.
You can talk about it, and I'll pull it up while you do that.
But I'll read it out. This will be the closing sort of sentiment for today, I guess, before we go into any Arsenal steps. But Volzar the Lightning Rod is a lightning wizard weapon, 2-handed staff. So this says, if you control an aura permanent with sigil in its name, this costs 1 less to activate. So currently at the moment, the only sigil with aura in its name is Sigil of Protection, I believe, which came in, I think it was maybe Dynasty, perhaps. Dynasty or Everfest.
Yeah, unfortunately to actually a little bit, there are some illusionist auras that have sigil in the name, but
actually
for wizard, yeah, I think there's I looked it up as well. Sigil of Protection.
Just a generic one, yeah.
Yeah, it's just ward. Yeah, it's a 1 cost that has ward 4 at red and ward 2 at blue. Actually, one more time, there is another wizard card that has sigil in the name, but it is a defense reaction. So
Parapets. Sigil of Parapets.
Yeah, Sigil of Parapets, exactly.
Which I've never seen played at all ever in my life.
It's because it doesn't kill your opponent and then amplify the damage that your crap does or whatever. Like
that's right.
Like exactly. Actual like degenerate wizard cards. Yeah.
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 I think that Volzar is pretty good, all things considered. At least comparing it to because obviously it's amp and it's not the like +1 that something like Crucible of Aetherweave gives, so it doesn't interact with Forked Lightning, but it does. It becomes free. Yeah, which is it's pretty funny. It becomes free if you have an aura with sigil. I assume we're going to get a couple of those. Some of the Lightning Wizard instance that we've seen thus far, I think there's maybe only the one, but my imagination's going wild. Going to go pretty crazy.
It does just say lightning cards, not lightning wizard or instance. So you could technically like ball lightning, and then pump this thing up with ball lightnings, which is kind of funny.
That sounds horrendous.
That sounds awesome. Living Legend.
Like I don't want to do that.
Living Legend format. Let's go lightning wizard ball lightning. Anyway,
just going off this first part of text here, if you control an aura permanent with sigil in its name, this is free. This sort of gives me the feelings of the Slay the Spire defect again. It gives me that feeling of, if you control a lightning orb, then it does something. It does something at the start of your turn or whatever. It gives me that sort of feeling. So I imagine you want to be getting all of these sort of thing, these auras into play with sigil of lightning or sigil of shock or whatever, and then you can, for free, just get amp X, where X is the number of lightning cards you've played this turn, which are obviously going to be instants. We haven't seen Auxilio's ability yet, but this is probably something. Yeah, this is the thing that he would use, or it would use, as a giant robot, which we know is young. So fuck knows what the old one's going to be. as was talking about that. I just realized like the flavor of this. How does that dude
use this? How big is this lightning rod?
I don't know.
Like, he's so big.
I don't know.
Does he just have it? Like, he's just got a little tiny, like, just hold it a little tiny, or is this thing like massive? Is this like a huge
Doesn't make sense.
thing? I don't know. I don't know the scaling of this.
I'll metaphorically put my hat in the ring on this one. Somebody, I think it was locally asked, Acilio is basically a door. How does he wear a spring tunic? And I just responded, staple gun.
Staple gun. Yeah.
So
Metric staple gun, black tech staple gun.
Staple gun. just lean it up against him. There we go.
Oh, dude. I just had a great idea that's not great, but it could be great. I want to see someone draw like one of those giant freaking mechs from Metrics fighting the door wizard. Like, I want to see like a kaiju battle, right? Like lightning, like lightning door wizard fighting the big mech, and then you have like Azalea down there on the bottom, and like maybe Dorinthia, and they're just looking up, and they're just like, how does this make sense with like singing Steelblade or something like that? You know, like. Yeah, anyway.
Oh, that was funny.
Yeah, 20 health.
Yeah.
Azalea could,
that was actually,
you can get up there. You can hit him for enough to one-shot him.
Yeah, you got things like Flight Path and you Merc My Grapnels and stuff you can use to sort of fling onto the arms of the robot and get up there and try and poke him with your arrowhead, your blood rot arrow. Even though you're not going to be able to infect a robotic body.
Yeah, how does the blood rot arrow do anything to the door?
I don't know.
Anyway.
I like that.
Yeah. Inertia's not going to affect a robot. Robots never sleep.
We need...
So it's not going to get apathetic or anything.
More Dead Summer art videos explaining the lore on how this stuff works. I want to know how you give blood rot to the door hero. Robot. Or the robot, yeah. Or like Teklevossen. How does Teklevossen get like blood rot or inertia? He's a freaking robot, especially when he's like, especially when he's like transcended and become like Neklovossen, you know?
More than human. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, that whole thread was being discussed on Twitter as well. Shout out to James Adams, another UK fella, who said, "My prediction for Oscilio, LSS have taken the foot fetish memes to heart, and they will be the first hero without a feet slot. Bold decision. Also means no Stormstriders." And then I commented on there saying, or even further perhaps, just no armor slots at all. Let's be honest, this robot cannot fit into anything human-sized.
It's actually kind of interesting. I wonder if they're just like, screw it. Because like as mentioned in previous podcasts, especially ones where we talk with devs, I mentioned that I still listen to Mark Rosewater's Drive to Work podcast. I find it fascinating, even if I'm not really currently into Magic. I just really respect him as a game designer. And I listened to one episode recently called something along the lines of like the elephant in the boots problem, and that the problem is like, how do you put lightning greaves on like a Loxodon or something, like, an elephant or something like that, and they try, like, Magic tries to make it make sense a little bit, and they kind of joke around with it. And I wonder if Flesh and Blood is just like, screw it, like, we don't care, we'll just tunic, you could just staple gun the tunic to do the thing or whatever. Or like,
it's like suiting up a squirrel in Argentum armor. It gets +6/+6 whenever it attacks, destroy target permanent. Yeah, all right then.
Yeah.
or like you play your Emrakul and you put lightning greaves on Emrakul. Like, what does it have, like, on the end of like one of the tentacles or something? Now I'm fast. Yeah.
And suddenly the Emrakul beast is running on its tentacles with lightning greaves. Like, you can't hit me because I have shroud, whatever it is.
One of my favorite ones is
lightning greaves, shroud.
Yeah. But like one of my favorite ones is, I think they printed a card that was like, it was like a crab holding like one of the swords. It was like a sword of fire and ice, a sword of light and shadow or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, I think it's just like they just don't care anymore. They just have fun with it, or try to make it make sense.
That makes sense as well, because I used to run a commander called Erigsmathes, a Slumbering Isle. It was a
big turtle thing.
It was a land creature, it basically awakens into a 12/12 Kraken when you have 5 slumber counters taken off of it. And then I was like, I'll equip it with Whisper Silk Cloak, and I'll make him go through I'll make the island creature go through the Rogue's Passage. Yeah, like he's gonna fit through that.
Here's the flavor for you.
Just sucks it
Here's
in.
the flavor for you. Yeah, you have somebody laying down the Whisper Silk cloak like a picnic blanket.
Okay.
Just on the shores of this island.
Maybe on its head.
Now he can't be targeted.
Like on the top of his
see
head
it anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I like
the funniest part is I've been listening to Mark Rosetter talk, and I've like for years, right? It was like the thing that I listened to when I was a baker, doing all this kind of stuff. And I remember a long time ago, he was talking about Theros, and he was talking about designing Theros, and they wanted to make a Hercules character for Theros, and he wanted to make Hercules into like a 10-10 or a 12-12. But the people, like other people were like, no, he's a human, and that would just confuse people why he's a 10-10 or a 12-12. So we have to make him into like a 2-2 because he's like a human size. And now they're just like, whatever, man. Like here's an 8-8 dude. He's just like a dude. He's an 8-8. Sure, why not?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, now I want my 12-12 Hercules. I want 12-12 Hercules, man. Anyway, I just think the design is interesting. You're going back to Flesh and Blood. I don't know if they care. Like,
no, exactly. It's funny. It's a funny thing to bring up because other games clearly just don't care anymore. They're just like, yeah, whatever. It's funny, So yeah. Well, that pretty much rolls into the Arsenal step anyway. And if anybody has anything other than Flesh and Blood related, considering we just spoke about that for the last 5 minutes, if anybody else wants to go with anything else.
Nah.
Yeah, I don't think so. We're this is I guess just a funny thing that is happening currently in Magic the Gathering. There's a set that's coming out relatively soon called Bloomburrow, where all of the creatures are they are creatures. They're like, it's squirrels and otters, and like it's supposed to be kind of like Redwall or something like that. And there's one of the big bads in the story for Bloomburrow is this big bird, it's like an owl, and it has I think the flavor text is its wings span from dusk to dawn. Like it's and it's called Maha, its feathers night, and it's this big black owl. And,
that's one that makes the toughness creatures 1, doesn't it? That one.
Yes. Yeah. So very, very cool deck. We ended up brewing it at some point, obviously. A little bit of a spoiler, but we put out a little teaser clip of us talking about Maha, and but it's really funny because one of our friends of the channel, his name's Sean, was sitting in for a game, and he was the one playing the deck, and he read the creature, and he's like, I don't know how to parse the name of this creature. And we're like, what do you mean? He says, well, it's Maha. And we're like, yeah. And he's like, and then it's just a statement. It's Feathers Night. And so we were like, like it's Girls Night. Like, oh, it's Feathers Night.
It's Feathers Night.
So, yeah, on our Patreon, we posted a little teaser of, and then it also devolved once again from just saying it's Feathers Night and kind of doing jazz hands to, instead of saying its name normally, we would go Maha,
Maha,
like a bird. Maha, it's Feathers Night.
Brilliant.
So we were just giggling about that today.
I did watch the little trailer thing for Bloomburrow. I actually commented to Robin, my partner, while I was watching. I was like, it's crazy how much like random Magic stuff I end up watching, even though I don't like purchase anything or play Magic these days. And I was just watching, and I'm like, this is the most twee thing I've ever seen. It's just like, oh, there's a little cute rabbit with a sword, and here's a little cute bunny or a little cute mouse just doing magic or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It is funny. Like if you were a Magic content creator, you would have no slow week, at all, would you? Because there's just so much going on. It's crazy. I mean, I saw a little bit of Bloomburrow. I think I saw it was like a Sultai frog. Commander, legendary creature.
I saw the frog. Yeah. His name's like
pretty good. You can play things off the top if it's converted mana cost. He's
got a great name. It's like Glurp or something like that.
I think it's Glarb.
Glarb, yeah, good name.
Glarb,
I'll look it up.
It's a great name.
I'm pretty sure it's Glarb.
Yeah.
There's also another frog called Flubs the Fool.
Oh, I saw Flubs.
Good one.
He's Teamer because I perked up because I'm like, ooh, Teamer. Could this go in my Maelstrom Wanderer deck? Read it. Nope. This card is not going in my deck.
I think it's powerful on its own, but yeah, it's It's definitely not something that you can like slot into an existing strategy for the most part.
Yeah, it basically makes you discard cards if you have cards in hand, but it makes you draw cards if you don't have cards in hand. So definitely going to build around him so you're just kind of like turboing into your stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm like, yeah, no. But he's cool and kind of goofy looking. So, yeah.
Yeah. Funny stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. There's always something going on with that game, isn't there? There we go.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's... I don't know if it's exhausting or not, but I see, like... I'm still subscribed to Spike Feeders, Pleasant Kenobi, and TOLARIAN Community College, and Vince, like, I swear, half of the videos are like, this is cool, and half of the videos are, like, explaining why it's a controversy or whatever, and I swear it's like 50-50 whether it's going to be one or the other. He's like, oh, this thing's cool, or like, everyone hates this, or like, Wizards did something awful or something, and I'm just like, geez, I guess guess I'm glad I don't have to interface with that too much.
Yeah.
It feels like it's exhausting.
Yeah.
It's a lot, yeah. Like
That's
there was
cool,
an entire other like not a real set for the most part, but like a subset that was revealed in between the last set and now the spoilers for Bloomburrow that are happening. An entire Universes Beyond Assassin's Creed product came out.
Yeah.
And nobody cares about it.
Like,
Nobody.
oh man, so like I said, I have a rogue assassin deck, and I know they came out with this thing. I'm just like, I don't want any of these. I don't want any of these cards, man. Like they would probably be really good in my deck, but also I don't know, man. Like maybe in a couple months when all the cards are like 5 cents or whatever, maybe I'll pick up a couple or something. I don't know.
Yeah, so some of the effects are good, but it's just like, I don't want this Assassin's Creed PlayStation art on my cards. No thanks.
The thing is like, I like Assassin's Creed. I played almost all the games up to a certain point. I really loved Origins, the one that takes place in Egypt. That game was awesome. But like,
there's a Japan one coming out as well soon, isn't there? I think Assassin's Creed set in Japan.
Yeah. I will likely play that one. Looks cool. I want to play as the cool ninja lady. And then you also got to play as like the samurai dude.
I still want to play Ghost of Tsushima. Have any of you played that?
The game is baller, dude. Yes, I have almost 100% completed that game. That game is excellent. Yeah. Highly recommend. Go play.
Got around to it.
Yeah. It's very cool. I watched a thing on that game about like how historically accurate it is. It's really interesting. Some things are, and some things are very not. And I think the things that are very not are more for like gameplay and fun reasons than like just not being historically accurate. I don't know. It's interesting, but it's a cool game. It's fun if you like the sneaky assassin-y kind of gameplay, and it's gorgeous. So yeah, I recommend it.
Yeah, I do want to say for people who were upset about a very specific, potentially inconsistency with history that a lot of people were upset about with the newest Assassin's Creed.
The people who are wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, that people that are upset that Yusuke is a black man.
He's an actual dude.
Like he's an actual dude for one, and for two, it's like, oh well, like this isn't historically accurate. Whether or not this is historically accurate is totally like immaterial to me, because in one of the games you meet Leonardo da Vinci, who has a magical golden apple called the Apple of Eden that blinds him.
Yeah. Well, there's a bunch of Eden artifacts.
When did that happen?
Hey, the Assassin's Creed lore. There's like a civilization before the civilization, and that's where you get all of these Eden artifacts, and they do like magical crap. And Assassin's Creed lore is very crazy and wild. Yeah. And Yasuke was like
getting upset for being upset.
Not only a dude, but he's like a legend. Like he's like awesome.
Yeah.
Like if you actually know about like Japanese like history, he's like awesome. So I don't know. I think it's cool. So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's Assassin's Creed talk. Yeah. I will probably be playing. Well, I'm definitely gonna buy the game and play it. I don't know if I'm gonna play it on launch, but at some point I will. So yeah. Does anyone?
We're a big fan of all games, of all things geek in this podcast. That's for sure.
Certainly are.
Yeah,
I keep downloading games, but just not being able to play them. Especially at the moment with League That Means Nothing project coming up soon. That's going to be sucking up all my time. So just haven't really. I even downloaded a game called Disco Elysium the other day.
Ooh,
I'm not sure if
another good one.
You've heard of that.
Disco Elysium is a very good game.
Yeah, haven't played that before, but I love Baldur's Gate and love all the dialogue. And I imagine there's a lot of dialogue options in this one.
Yeah,
from what I've heard.
Yeah, it's a great game.
I would say mostly dialogue.
Yeah, but it's like very well written. It's good. It's really, really good.
Yeah,
I
got a lot.
As every other degenerate gacha and or anime enjoyer, I downloaded and have been playing Zenless Zone Zero a little bit. If you want my take, I don't like it as much as Wuthering Waves. Anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about, this is just gobbledygook. But people who know, you know. ZZZ is pretty good. They're not as generous. MiHoYo is not as generous as like Kuro, and I really like Wuthering Waves a lot more. So, but I've been playing those. I played ZZ a little bit before I left for AX, and my whole last week up until like I came back from AX on the 7th, so it's only been a couple days since I've been there. Anime Expo was amazing. I'm constantly bewildered at how like this year is kind of like a dream come true for me, like going to Japan twice and then going to Anime Expo, and not just like going to AX, but like I attended Anime Expo as an exhibitor. Like, so I had like an exhibitor badge, which is kind of like the highest level of badge, like the most permission, so I could like go into the exhibition hall like after it closed, because I was part of basically the Bushiroad booth. So exhibitor badge as Bushiroad. So I do want to give a huge shout to Bushiroad for inviting me there. And I basically spent some time at the Shadowverse area in the exhibition hall or at an entertainment hall. I have a whole vlog. I'm not going to get into it too much. You'll see it all in the vlog, but it was awesome just meeting people from like Psy Games, meeting people from Bushiroad. I had gunslinging so people could come and challenge me as the ambassador. It was really, really fun. I was really honored that there were so many people who showed up that we had to turn them away because we just didn't have time to play against everyone. Everyone who played me got a couple free packs and some other stuff. Overall, I ended up breaking almost even. I only lost one time on the second day. Basically I brought some like meta decks and decks that I just really enjoyed, and I let my opponent pick what deck they play against because I wanted it to make a fun experience for them. And a couple players who came, they're definitely not new players, they're definitely like tournament players and known people, and they picked the best matchups, and it was really tough, but the community was great and a good time. So AX, that's what I've been mostly doing. Like I said, there's gonna be a vlog. I got a lot of stuff. Mostly hung out with some artist friends too. Yeah. So there's that. Yeah. Oh, I also learned. People are curious about other card games. I learned how to play Weiss Schwarz. I learned how to play Card Fight Vanguard. They're both actually really, really fun. I also learned how to play the Hololive card game that isn't that was recently announced. So I got a demo, like a one-on-one demo. They would not let me record anything because it's still under wraps. Very interesting. Very similar to like the One Piece card game and like Pokemon in a lot of regards, but it's kind of interesting, and I definitely want to play a little bit more. So if you're into Hololive and VTubers, I think that game's interesting. And then Union Arena, I got like a little demo deck for like Union Arena and stuff. So I did a lot of card gamey stuff next to spending way too much money. So
sounds about right.
Yeah, there's my AX. Little blurb. So yeah,
nice. Sweet. Well, yeah, we'll see a vlog on that soon then, which is nice. Good stuff.
Yep. Like there was like 350,000 people there. There's a lot. So you'll see it. Yep. Jeez. It's sold out. And last year it sold out and there was 340,000, and I think it's pretty close this year is what I was told. So
wow.
A lot of people. I've never been to an event that big, and it was wild. So yeah.
Geekism is growing in all of its forms. Love it. Apart from that, that's pretty much it for this week. Living Legends podcast. I've been Alex from Go Again Gaming, your host for today. You can find me on Go Again Gaming AZ on Twitter, and then Go Again Gaming on YouTube, which is going to be pretty lively over the next few months. So harkening back to a league that means nothing, that's going to be probably ongoing content for the next 3 months, I reckon. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. Got a very diverse set of heroes playing, including these gentlemen in the chat. We're all bringing different decks as well. None of us are repeat decks, so it should be fun. So yeah, go and check that out when you can. And then I'll throw it over to Bill next, please.
Hell yeah. Well, I have been and always am Bill from the Spike Feeders. You can find me on YouTube at Spike Feeders Fab, where we do live edited gameplay content. You can also find me on social media at BillTSF. And you can find me on the League That Means Nothing 2. Eventually. I don't know when my game will be coming out, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. And then over to Kel, last but not least.
Hi, I'm Kel, Red Zone Rogue. Find me everywhere at Red Zone Rogue. Yep. Cover a lot of card games. Yeah, Grand Archive, Shadowverse, and other stuff. And I'll be on the league as well, and probably lose because I haven't, like I said, be my first time playing. But I don't know. Maybe I'll pitch a Plague Hive and it'll be fun. We'll get some dice out and we'll have some fun. So yeah,
absolutely. That's what it's all about. And as we close off, you know, we're all about just having fun with these games. Hopefully this comes across in this podcast every week. We just like having fun and just enjoying ourselves and all the worlds that we partake in, the characters that we play, and all this. So yeah, I think that's pretty evident every week anyway, at least. But yeah, thanks everybody, and we'll see you again all over again very, very soon. Cheers.
Bye.